Spectre Divide is dead. Just 2 weeks after the launch of Season 1, the developers of Spectre Divide, the tac-shooter tied to Shroud, has announced that it will be closing its studio this week and shutting servers down within the next 30 days. Another brutal hit for the gaming industry. Jobs lost, players refunded, and at least $65 million in funding gone. So how did we get here? In November of last year, we released a video discussing the state and health of the newly released free-to-play FPS, Spectre Divide. Now, I won't get into too much detail, but to bring you all up to speed in case you don't know, it was a 3v3 tac-shooter heavily inspired by Counter-Strike and Valorant. Its main selling feature was a mechanic that allowed you to control two bodies in a round, letting you freely switch between them and their respective locations, effectively giving you two lives. It was pretty neat, but a lot of the game's initial buzz was thanks to Shroud, who promoted it as an angel investor and collaborator. However, as addressed in my last video, Spectre Divide was never really able to get off the ground, and Shroud wasn't exactly helping, at least not visibly. Its launch did see a peak of 26,000 players on Steam, but interest for the game quickly evaporated as the daily player count dropped to under 1,000. I did go over some of the issues fans had with Spectre Divide: cheaters, missing features, and quality of life stuff, the usual. But honestly, to the average gamer, there didn't seem to be a lot of interest for this title in the first place. Even Shroud wasn't playing it. At the time of that video, I said he hadn't streamed it since September 18th, and according to Twitch Tracker, he's only played it one more time, and that was at the beginning of March. Now, Shroud is an investor, and has likely no obligation to actually play this game if he doesn't want to. But after a little digging, it seems there are a lot of other investors as well. Tarek, It's Timmy, Co-Carnage, and Paul George for whatever reason. But when the title to your first video is, quote, "We're launching a new game," it's going to be a bad look to your audience when you don't play it or talk about it while mainlining pretty much every other title there is. That being said, I don't really think this is why the game failed, which brings us to the bad news. On March 12th, Nate Mitchell, the CEO of the game studio Mountaintop, released a lengthy statement announcing that Spectre Divide and the studio would be shutting down. They released a substantial gameplay update along with their first season, but after 2 weeks, the player count and money spent wasn't generating enough revenue for any of it to stay afloat. The statement continues, saying they attempted every avenue, including selling, but nothing was able to work, and Spectre Divide will be shutting down within the next 30 days, and Mountaintop itself by the end of this week. I should also point out that they are offering refunds for any money spent on cosmetics during Season 1. Now, what follows that are some pretty candid remarks from Nate Mitchell about the process, and a glimpse into what he thinks might have went wrong. He obviously thanks his team, investors, the community, and everyone else who played a role in Spectre Divide, but also admits that they may have missed the mark and knew that odds were going to be against them from the very beginning. And he concludes by saying that the industry has changed a lot since they first broke ground in 2020. And this is my main takeaway. A lot of people are discussing what could have caused Spectre Divide to fail, from the oversaturation of this genre to one novel new feature not being enough to really grab people's attention. And I think that these are both true, but I also believe that this failure is just a symptom of a much larger trend we're seeing in the industry right now. When Mountaintop first started making this game, audiences wanted vastly different things than they do right now. You make a studio during the pandemic, create some remote jobs, and start working on a passion project in a genre that really only has one giant taking up the bulk of the market. Years of hard work go by, and suddenly the genre is bloated. There's another massive tac-shooter with a similar art philosophy, and what gamers want is wildly different now. Meanwhile, you have employees with families to feed and $65 million in funds that you raised. You don't just give up, and it gets to a point where you can't really pivot either. So it's too late to do anything else but see it through to the end. I believe this is the exact same thing we saw with Concord, and I believe that we're going to see it again with more games, especially live service shooters. Hell, I even suspect that Ubisoft has gone through the exact same thing with Assassin's Creed Shadows, a game that should have been out for a long time by now. But the feedback for a game that they started working on a long time ago was not good, so they put it back in the oven in the hopes that they could save what they built and tailor the experience to be more in line with what gamers want right now. Anyway, those are just my thoughts, and I'm sure they're not entirely unique, but regardless, I do appreciate the transparency from Nate Mitchell, who has been responding to people on Twitter in regards to this whole announcement. The response in general has been pretty supportive, a lot of people saying they did enjoy the game and wish the devs the best going forward, but Obviously, there are going to be some people gloating about being right. But I'll remind you, these are people with lives and families who now have to find new work. And at the end of the day, regardless of whether a game missed the mark or not, this isn't a good sign for the future of the industry, whether you're an indie studio or a AAA publisher.
True.
Facts. No printer. Chips. No salsa. Copy. No paper.
Water. Bottle. No.
No, that didn't work.